Hello, this is Steve from SDRplay. In today's video, I am going to introduce you to our newest product, the nRSP-ST, which is your personal networked radio receiver. I'll go through a little bit about what this receiver does and what it offers, and then later on I will show you how to set it up and get it ready for use. So this is what we're going to be covering in today's video. As usual, I draw your attention to the description below, where there will be a link for you to download a slide deck so you don't need to make notes as you're going along. In addition, I will be creating chapter markers so that for future reference you can just click through to the relevant part of the video for the information you're looking for. First up will be a short unboxing video showing you what you get when you purchase an nRSP-ST, and then I'm going to go into an overview of what exactly this product does for you. Once we've done that, I will show you how to do the hardware setup, and then following on from that we'll do the software setup. Once we've done that and we've got everything set up and shown you how you can access this device from anywhere on your network, I will go into how you can also access the nRSP-ST from a web browser. Then a few comments on how to access from outside your local network, and then I'll wrap it up with a comparison with other similar internet-based implementations for SDRs. Let's have a look inside the box. First up, you'll notice there's an instruction leaflet which gives you a brief introduction to the device and also gives you a reference to the website where you can get full detailed instructions as well as download the software. Next, we have the nRSP itself. It's in a large metal box, about twice the size of previous RSPs. The front panel just has a couple of LEDs, a green power light and a yellow network light. On the back, you have your antenna connections. You have the ability to connect up to 3 antennas. You can add an external reference. And then for networking, you have a choice of either Ethernet or Wi-Fi. So next up in the box, you will find we provide a Wi-Fi antenna. The preferred connection to allow for maximum bandwidth, full IQ and all that good stuff is to use the Ethernet connection. And indeed you'll need to use Ethernet to set up the device initially, but subsequently after setting it up you can just move it to a Wi-Fi system. So I recommend you connect the antenna to the device. The main reason being, even if you're not going to use Wi-Fi, if you don't connect it, the chances are it's going to get lost, and when you need it later, you won't be able to find it. So we have the antenna. We also, within the box, we provide a power supply. The power supply that comes with it is universal. It has a selection of adapters in there. So I've got the US adapter on here right now, but there are additional adapters for use in various countries around the world, and it is universal voltage, so anywhere from like 110 to 240, that kind of thing. And on the end of the power supply is a USB-C connector. So what exactly is an nRSP-ST? Well, it's a truly plug-and-play, single-box, remote access, 14-bit general coverage SDR radio receiver. Quite a mouthful. The radio part of it is very similar to the RSP-DX R2, which you may be familiar with, which is a 1 kHz to 2 GHz radio capable of displaying up to 10 MHz of bandwidth, and with a choice of 3 software selectable antenna inputs. The nRSP-ST adds to this a host controller which enables you to connect directly to your local network without a separate host computer. This box can then be accessed from anywhere with a choice of several connectivity modes to take best advantage of the available bandwidth. We call them Full IQ, IQ Lite and Compact, and I'll discuss that a bit later on. You can have multiple clients connected, and they can have a simultaneous mixture of any of those connection modes. You can either connect to it using our SDRconnect software, which you may be familiar with, or you can access the built-in web server and access the device from anywhere, from any device that has web browsing capability. And that would include, of course, Android phones and tablets, as well as iPhones and iPads. You also have the ability to record IQ and audio files to network-attached storage or any other storage device on your network, and you can set all this up remotely. So quite a lot packed into one little box. So there are quite a number of different ways that you can use the device. At home, maybe your receiver is mounted outside in the shack and you don't want to go trudging out through the cold ice and snow, and you can connect to it from the comfort and warmth of your living room. Alternatively, if you're away from home, you still have full access to the device, either by means of the SDRconnect client software or a web browser. On top of that, you can also share it with your friends. You can set up user authentication to keep out unwanted users. And you can also set up timeouts, so if someone connects and is idle, they will be automatically disconnected. And you can also limit the session time, so no one user can hog all the time on your box. As I mentioned before, it supports multiple client connections at the same time, and it does allow you to have full control over your hardware remotely. Now let's look at setting up the hardware. As you will see, it's pretty straightforward, as I will demonstrate in the following clip. The device itself, being a network receiver, has been designed very much for unattended use in a location that may not be readily accessible to you. So there is circuitry built in to ensure that if the power goes out, for example, the device will reboot and come back online without any user intervention. And, it doesn't really matter whether it's just located in the next room or in a shack at the end of your yard or even on a mountain 50 miles away. You don't want to have to constantly go out and be rebooting the thing and getting it set up again. So the actual hardware setup is very simple. On the back of the device, the first thing you'll want to do is connect an antenna. So we have a choice of 3 inputs. The antenna I have here happens to have a BNC on it. So I'm going to connect it to antenna C. Secondly, you need a network connection. So I'm going to plug in an Ethernet cable to the network connection on the back. And then finally, what you'll need to do is connect the power. So we plug in the power. Initially, both LEDs will come on. The green one is for power, and the yellow indicates the boot sequence. It will come on solid initially, and then it will begin to flash as it goes through boot up. Eventually, the yellow LED will go off completely, which means that the boot up sequence is complete and the device is ready for use. The next step is to download the software, and we've set up a dedicated nRSP-ST start page on our website where you can download the necessary software, and it also contains full instructions on how to get up and running. So I'm going to go full screen and show you how the website looks. Okay, here we are at the SDRplay.com homepage, and you'll see over on the right there is a link specifically for the nRSP-ST. So we can click on that and get through to the nRSP page. Here you'll see some information about the nRSP, and there is a special start page linked to down here. We can go to that. And then the first thing we notice at the top of the page is that we have download buttons for the various operating systems. Now this will download SDRconnect, but also some additional programs. So it's important that you do the download from this page and not from the SDRconnect page. Once you perform the download, you will actually get 3 programs. You will get the SDRconnect software, the latest version. You will get a program called nRSP Updater, which can be used for updating the firmware. And thirdly, you will get the nRSP Administrator tool, which lets you set up various parameters for how you want the server to be accessed. So again, it's very important that you download the software from this page. Also on this page, you will see full instructions, and you can also download a PDF file if you want to print it out and follow along from that. Depending on which platform you're using, there are slight differences in the actual software installation. If you're operating on Windows, once you've downloaded the file, go to the Downloads window and click on Open File, and then run the installer in the usual way. If you're on a Mac, what you will download is a disk image file, .dmg. Double click on that to open it, and you will see the 3 programs I just described. Just drag all 3 of them over to your Applications folder in the usual way. And then finally, if you're on Linux or the Raspberry Pi, go to your Downloads folder and then select that file and make it executable, either using right-click and then Properties, or using the chmod 755 command, and then do / and then the file name to run the installer. Also, things that are slightly different depending on platform are the actual locations of the programs you've downloaded. On Windows, you can find them in Program Files, /SDRplay, /SDRconnect. On Mac, they'll be in your Applications folder, and on Linux or Raspberry Pi, they will be in the /opt/SDRconnect folder. So when you need to run those programs later, that's where you'll be able to find them. Now, the first thing you should do once the software has been installed is run the Firmware Updater tool. This is simply a means to check that you're running the latest firmware on your nRSP-ST. Once you've done it the first time, you're unlikely to need to run it again unless you've been informed that there is a firmware update available for your device. So when you open up the tool, the first window you see gives you the option to click on the button to find any nRSPs rather. Click on the button, and when it announces that it's found an nRSP-ST, if there is an update available, it will give you the option to install the new firmware. Once that is complete, or when you see a message that you already have the latest firmware, you can just click on Exit Program. So now you've taken care of that little detail, we can get down to having some fun. When the program starts up, it will automatically detect the nRSP on your network. You see it shown up here in the device drop-down. In fact, you'll actually see 3 instances of it. Full IQ is the ideal connection mode. However, it does require 400 megabits of bandwidth, and for that reason is recommended only for use on gigabit LANs. It will send the full IQ data stream across the network, so if you wanted to, you could record the full IQ spectrum at the client end. IQ Lite, on the other hand, requires a fairly modest amount of bandwidth, as little as 500 kilobits per second. And the constraint to get there is that only the demodulated bandwidth is sent as an IQ data stream, but that does make it very useful for decoding digital modes at the client end, i.e. across the internet, if that much bandwidth is available. And then thirdly, we have the compact mode. This requires the least bandwidth across the network, but of course it does impose the highest CPU load on the nRSP-ST. Everything is demodulated at the server end, and a very compressed data stream is sent across to the client. But even in compact mode, there's still enough bandwidth to decode low data rate digital signals. For example, shown here is me using WSJTX to decode FT8 while connected to a remote server in the UK from here in Colorado. So I've selected full IQ mode from the drop down at the top. So now I can go up and click the start stop button. And sure enough, there are some signals. And let me just select that band, 20 meters, and all sorts of good stuff going on there. So if you've used SDRconnect before, the first thing you'll notice is the layout is identical to what you're used to. And I'm not going to go into how to use SDRconnect here, but we have plenty of other videos available for download that will walk you through the various functions of SDRconnect. Instead, I'm going to highlight a few things that are a little bit different. There is a new icon up here for network information. And this will show you, if you're connected via Ethernet, as I am, that the connect rate from the nRSP-ST to my local router is 1 gigabit per second. Note this is just the local connection speed. It knows nothing about what the actual internet connection speed if you're connecting from outside your local network. If I had selected Wi-Fi, then I would see the Wi-Fi link quality here. Connected users, 1, that's me. And what that means is I see this control icon over here, and that means I have full hardware control over the device. So there's nobody in queue. This is the actual bandwidth I'm using across the network, and this is the round trip cycle time. So if I dismiss that and go to the device settings, we will see that I have full control over sample rate. I can select which antenna is in use. I can adjust RF gain and all the other good hardware stuff. And this capability is reserved for the first user that's connected. So having said that, everything functions just as normal in SDRconnect. Just my little joke. Of course, you can hit pause at any time during playing back the video when you feel like you need to take a break. But we have reached a natural break point. We've covered the basics of hooking up the nRSP-ST and connecting to it from the SDRconnect client. So if you want to take a break, stretch your legs, and grab a cup of coffee or something, now's a good time to do it, because when we come back, we'll be taking an in-depth look at the nRSP administrator tool. So now we've covered the basic operation of your nRSP-ST and how to access it through the SDRconnect client. But there are a lot more capabilities within the box, and I'd like to start that by going through the features that allow you to customize it as you wish using the administration tool. When you open up the tool, you will get to the login page. So the first thing you need to do is type in the administrator password, which by default is the serial number of your nRSP-ST. So we'll log in, and here we see the device status. Now at this point I must stress, as I set it up, as you will have noticed, I plugged in an Ethernet cable. And you have to use an Ethernet connection when you update the firmware and first set up the device. Even if you intend to use Wi-Fi going forward, these setup steps must be performed over Ethernet. Okay? So, if you do not plan to have an Ethernet connection where you finally install your nRSP, perhaps it's somewhere closer to where the antenna cables are coming into your shack, then at least for doing the setup, you should plug the nRSP into your router using an Ethernet cable, set it up, enable the Wi-Fi, then you can disconnect it from your router and take it to wherever you want to finally use it. And again, I will stress the best performance is if you use Ethernet. If you use Wi-Fi, you may not be able to get the best performance when using the full IQ mode. Now let's have a look at the various tabs available in the administrator tool, and we'll go through each one in turn. First up, let's have a look at the Ethernet tab. Not much to see here. If you turn on the advanced settings, you have the ability to set either automatic DHCP, which is recommended, or you can specify a manual IP address. Speaking of IP addresses, on the Wi-Fi tab also you have the ability to specify a manual IP address. We do not recommend that you do that. It is good to have a fixed IP address on your local LAN. That way the router won't assign it a different IP address, and then you won't be able to find the device so easily. However, the correct way to do that is to use IP assignments in the router settings page, not within the admin tool here. So if you want to use Wi-Fi, just select your SSID from the drop-down, or if it's hidden, input it manually and then type in your password and click on Save. Now let's look at the other features of the administrator tool. The next tab up would be the Users tab, which is a very useful tab indeed. This is where you specify particular users that you will allow to have access to your nRSP-ST. You can see on here I've already set up a couple of users, and to add a user, click on the Add tab. You can come up with a username, type in whatever you like, and a password. Now, also of interest is the idle timeout, and I'm going to set this to 5 minutes. And what this will do is, if there is no activity, it will disconnect the user after 5 minutes. And the reason this is useful is, A, it minimizes using up excessive bandwidth on your network. But secondly, you may recall the first user to log into the device is the one that has full hardware control over the nRSP, as indicated by the control icon that shows up. So you don't want some guy that's been using the device to go away and prevent another user from coming in and being able to select different antenna inputs and so on. And then the other timeout you can set is a session time limit. And this may come in useful if you have a bunch of friends that you want to grant access to. But once again, you don't want the first guy coming in and being connected indefinitely and preventing other users from coming in and having their share. Now, multiple users can connect simultaneously, but only the first user has full hardware control. So once you've put that information in, you can click on OK. Tells you it's been added successfully, and here is our new user down here. Also, if you input 0 as the idle timeout or session time, that means that particular user will never get disconnected. Kind of useful if you want to set yourself up as a user. You can come in first, take hardware control over the device, and then any other users logging in are unable to change it. One thing I would like to point out is, once you've set up these users, you do need to go down to the Streaming tab here and set the switch to require authentication, and also to enable disconnecting idle users and the session time limits. Now, once you set require authentication, make sure you have at least one user there and you can remember the username and password, or you won't be able to log in remotely yourself. So let's go back to the Users tab, and as I said, this is a very useful means of limiting who you share the device with, friends, club members, so on and so forth, and also set up your own name as a user so that you can access it remotely. Now, the next tab is Regional, and this is fairly straightforward. There's a drop down that lets you select your location, And I guess I should update mine since I am in America, Denver. Let's see if we can find that. There are so many choices. There we go. And the IARU region that you're in, which in my case would be the Americas, and we can save that. Moving on, we can look at the ports page. I've mentioned before about opening up ports. These are the default ports. 50,000 is the port used if you connect via a remote SDRconnect client. Alternatively, if you come in from the web browser, this is the port used, 9001 by default, and that's what you point your browser to for local access. As an informative piece of information, it shows you what the URL is for accessing the web client on your local LAN, and you see it's showing the IP address of the nRSP and again port 9001. So if for some reason you wanted to change these port numbers, this is the screen where you do it. You can change them to anything you like and just click on save. And these port numbers will also be used for accessing from the internet. However, to expose those ports to the outside, you will need to set up port forwarding or some other mechanism. Next up is the storage tab. And this allows you to set up a served storage device on your local network. You can specify the IP address of the storage, the share name, user, and password if needed to log into that storage. This would typically be used with a NAS or network attached storage, but you can in fact assign it to a hard drive, external hard drive connected to another computer on your network. And again, once you've specified all this, it shows you the path name to get to that storage device, which you would want to use later to play back the recordings. Next up, we have the streaming settings. We'd already been here to look at the setup for users to connect remotely. You also have the option as to which of the 3 connectivity modes you wish to allow. And normally you'd leave all 3 on. However, you do not necessarily want a lot of users coming in externally trying to use the full IQ bandwidth. So you might consider turning that off if you're having a lot of access from outside the LAN. IQ Lite, again, is more compressed. Normally you would leave it turned on. And then finally allow the compact mode for use with web clients. And then finally, you have the ability to allow virtual receivers to be set up. If you're familiar with SDRconnect, you may be aware you can set up multiple virtual receivers. Again, you might want to restrict that just to minimize the amount of bandwidth. Next up, we get to the recording tab. And here you can set up recording schedules. So if I click on add, I can give it a name. I can tell it what date and what start time is and how long it should record. Importantly, you have a choice of audio recordings or IQ recordings. Obviously, full IQ recordings take up a lot more storage space, but does allow you to tune throughout the recorded spectrum while you're playing it back. And then finally, and this is important, like in SDRconnect, you will want to have set up a profile for your device. So you will want to connect to the nRSP-DX, set up the bands and so on and so forth you wish to use. And I'd already set up a profile for mine, and that will be the profile used for the recording, regardless of how you had left the nRSP settings. And then once you've done all that, you can hit OK. In my case, I'll hit cancel. Next up, we come to the password. And if you want to change your admin password, and remember, this is the password for access to the administrator tool. This is not the user password we were setting up on the users tab. So type in your current password, the new password that you want, and then type it in a second time for confirmation and click on save. And I do recommend that you somehow have a means of remembering what your admin password is, because it gets a little bit messy if you can't log into this tool. And there are ways you can do it, but it's better if you don't have to. And then finally, there's the Reset tab. And if you type the word reset in the top box and reset the device, it will set the device back to the factory settings. This also means that your admin password will now revert back to the serial number of the device. Or you can do a simple software reboot if you, for some reason, have a need for that. I have yet to encounter a situation where that's necessary. So that rounds up the settings for the administrator tool. As you can see, it gives you a very powerful set of features which go way beyond the simple using SDRconnect as a server. With the nRSP-ST, it has a lot of additional capability built in. Well, that was quite an exercise, wasn't it? And again, I think now is a good time to take a natural break. And when we come back, we'll get into the last segment of this video, where we talk about using a web browser to access the nRSP-ST, a few thoughts on connecting from outside your local network, as well as a quick comparison of this network solution versus some of the other ones you may have seen out there in the market. The first way to connect is by using the serial number of your nRSP-ST. Now, this will only work if you're on the same subnet as the nRSP-ST. If you're not, you'll have to use the second approach I'll get into in a moment. So in the search bar or in the URL bar, type in nRSP, and then follow that with the serial number of the device, which in my case is 230.50.20.550, then .local:9001. If I put that in, then straight away we're into the web interface. You see it says web, where normally you'd see the device drop down. You can hit play, and once again we see signals. And one thing you'll notice is, although it's very similar to the regular appearance of SDRconnect, it is somewhat simplified, because we anticipate that you'll be using the web access typically from a remote location across the internet. So you do not see the familiar panels on the right hand side, which show things such as auxiliary spectrum, AGC settings, recording settings, and so on and so forth. But other than that, the basic interface is just the same. You have the same option to have control from the first user, and you'll see link speed information from the nRSP to your local router. The second approach is, instead of putting in the serial number of the device on your local network, you can use the IP address. So now we type in the IP address, which in my case is 10.00.30, and again, :9001, the port number we set up in the admin tool. And if we hit enter, again we see, firstly we see the web assembly object is downloading. Once that's done, then we get into the familiar web interface. I should mention, on some mobile devices or on some older devices, if they are not capable of handling a web assembler object, then it may not be possible to use this approach. Once we have the ability to connect via a web browser, we're no longer confined to just desktop computers or laptops. We can start thinking about mobile devices such as my iPad here. So to do that, we simply type in the IP address, and it will produce the icon when it's downloading the assembly object. And after a few seconds, the familiar display will appear. It's just the same as it was using the desktop computer in a web browser. So the next thing we need to do is press the play button. And here we see some signals on the 20-meter band. I'm going to hit the mute button in the upper left, and then select the band buttons. so I get a nice view of the entire 20-meter band. I can control which band I'm on. I can select 40 meters, and you can see that. Sorry about the reflections. And I can tune by tapping on the display. So I can tap down here, here, and here. So in many ways, it functions just like the other clients. The problem is, on a touch device, it's very hard to precisely tune a particular frequency. And for that reason, we've added another feature. Up here in the top, we see a little hand icon. And if I select that, we see some new controls appearing at the bottom of the screen. And we can use those controls for tuning up and down, changing the received bandwidth, and zooming in on the spectrum. And a good way to see this is to start off by zooming in a little bit. So I'm going to press the zoom button here, and you can see an expanded view of the spectrum there. And now if I use the up and down tuning arrows, you can see that the tuning is moving up and down the band. The actual tuning size will depend on the step size you've got set in the sidebar over here. So that makes it a lot more convenient on screens that are smaller than, say, a desktop or a laptop. In addition to that, we still have full hardware control, as indicated by the control icon. So I can open up the device hardware settings, and I can adjust sample rate, antenna selection, RF gain, and so on. And one tip for using it on smaller displays, perhaps more so on mobile phones rather than tablets, is you can, once you've set up however you want the device to be set up, you can hide this sidebar using this icon in the upper right. So now maximum real estate is dedicated to looking at the RF spectrum and the waterfall. So this gives you a great deal of flexibility, both at home and away from home. In my case, I like to move away from the shack and sit in a comfy chair in front of a fire, and I can still control my nRSP-ST using the iPad. So this adds a whole additional set of use cases, and we think you'll really enjoy this feature of your nRSP-ST. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about accessing your nRSP-ST from outside your local network. The bottom line is, whatever means you use, you need a way to open up port 9001 if you want the web access, such that an incoming connection from outside will find its way to your nRSP-ST on your local network. If you're going to run the SDRconnect client remotely, then you need to open up port 50,000, both of those being the default settings, although you can change them to any values you like. So having said that, the easiest way is to enable port forwarding on your router. And what this does is it looks for incoming traffic. For example, if it sees incoming traffic on port 9001, it will then forward the traffic to the local IP address of your nRSP-ST, and hence you can set up a connection via the web browser. Similarly, if you're using the SDR client remotely, you need to open up port 50,000, so that in turn will be forwarded to the local IP address of your nRSP-ST. And what you see on the screen here is the setup I have on my router, which happens to be from Xfinity. And you will see that it opens up ports 9001 and 50,000 and redirects them to IP address 10.0030, which is where my nRSP-ST is. So that's the easiest way to set it up. Now, some people are concerned about security from opening up ports to the outside world. I've had mine set up this way for some time, and I haven't run into any real security issues. If the nRSP-ST receives an incoming connection and it's not communicating in the fashion it expects, it just closes down that connection. But some people are very concerned about opening up ports to the outside world, in which case they might want to consider a different solution. And then the bigger problem, I think, is that if your ISP uses something called CGNAT, it will not work. What CGNAT does is the ISP actually has an effective router outside your home, and it shares the same WAN IP address with multiple subscribers. So an incoming request has no way of knowing that it should come to your house and not your neighbor, who is sharing that same IP address because of the router from the ISP. So in that case, you'll have to look at a different approach. So that different approach, item 2 here, is to set up your own VPN server. It is quite a bit more complicated to set up, but people have done it, and I've given you some example solutions here that I've seen people using. PureVPN claims to be able to bypass CGNAT, for example. Cloudflare, Zero Tier, and Tailscale have all been mentioned. I think Zero Tier has been mentioned a lot from the users of the Flex Radio SDRs for remote connection. But please note, SDRplay is not able to provide support for setting it up when you're using an external server of this nature. So you will have to go to the manufacturer's website for further information on how to set it up. But just remember, you just want access to ports 9001 and 50,000 on the local IP address of your nRSP-ST. So, having enabled the setup, item 3 is, how do you access from a remote SDR client? Well, you hit the 3-dot menu in the upper right of the screen and select Remote Devices Editor. And within the window that opens up, if you click on plus, you're able to name the connection, put in the WAN IP address, in other words, the IP address of your house from the outside, or a host name. I use a dynamic host name so I don't have to remember WAN IP addresses, which may be changed on a whim by my ISP. And the port you're using, again, 50,000 is the default. Alternatively, if you want to come in from a remote web browser, just simply in the browser window, type in the WAN IP address or the host name, and then follow that with :9001 or whatever port number you're using. And hopefully that helps you set it up for access from the outside world. One final note before we move on. You can find more information about setting up remote networking if you go to our website or indeed the YouTube playlist and look for the video on SDRconnect networking. I'd like to try and wrap this up now by looking at a comparison of some alternative implementations of remote access to SDRs in general and RSPs in particular. The way the nRSP-ST has been designed, it's very much geared towards personal networking. The key features here being that you have full hardware control from anywhere, but at the same time you still have the ability to share your nRSP-ST with other users. There are a variety of other web-based systems out there enabling you to log into other people's receivers remotely and have a little look around the bands. WebSDR is an example, and I know a lot of RSP owners have allocated their RSP so that other users can come in remotely and see what's going on. These are excellent sites, but again, they do not offer you the full hardware control capabilities offered by the nRSP-ST. Probably the most frequently asked question we get is, what is the difference between an nRSP-ST and using a Raspberry Pi as host to my existing RSP product? Well, the functionality is very similar, and at the top level, it's pretty much the same. However, there are a lot of differences when you use an nRSP-ST. You have the ability to control access, you have the ability to come in from a web browser, and the whole software and hardware of the device has been very much optimized for remote unattended operation. I put together a little table here, probably hard for you to see on the screen, so again I would encourage you to download the accompanying slide deck, and there's a link to that in the description below this video. Well, that just about wraps it up for today's video. In summary, the nRSP-ST is your personal network receiver. It allows you to access the radio from anywhere, either on your own premises or remotely, and share that access with a select group of users. It's been designed to allow for remote unattended operation, has flexibility in terms of hookup using Wi-Fi or Ethernet. It has different connectivity modes depending on the network capability that you're using, and like all RSPs, it offers a 1 kHz to 2 GHz tuning range, and in the case of this particular device, a choice of 3 software selectable antenna inputs. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you found the video informative. Also, for further information, please visit SDRplay.com. 73.